societal trends are really interesting. That they change very slowly. It's often difficult to know which way they're going, but there are three things that I wanted to talk to you about with regard to society. The first is that over the last 10 years, trust in institutions, particularly companies, has gone down. Now, it's not sort of gone like this, but as you can see from there, it's sort of going down every single year. So whereas you might have thought, well, actually, you know, our brand is great, people love us, it's not that people hate companies, it's just that they know what you are. You know, in the past, you could have employed a great brand consultant and they would have rebranded you. But in a world where every single person has got a mobile phone and a camera, they will take a picture of everything that happens to every executive in your company. They will put it on the web, and there are mechanisms to collate that by company, and that will only increase. And I hadn't heard the research, Brian, that you'd showed, that 50% of what people say in the web is negative. That doesn't surprise me at all. So actually, huge implications for authentic leadership. You know, unless you can find leaders who are prepared to behave in the way they say, you're dead in the water, because there'll be somebody taking a photograph of them doing whatever it is they're not supposed to do. So trust will decrease. We don't see any change in that. Second thing that I've pulled out is that people are becoming much more isolated. You know, they're going to be working from their homes virtually, and they live in smaller units. And the big societal trend there is right across the world, even in Africa, even in India, sorry, which in the past have had the largest family units. Family units are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, to such an extent that even now, the average family unit in Denmark, for example, is one person. The average family unit in Denmark is a person living on their own. That's pretty astounding, isn't it? The average. And we see that continue. Now, what I think will happen, and I've described it in the book I've just finished, is there'll be a sort of a counter movement where people will reconnect with each other, and they'll start moving back together, but not necessarily in family units. The future, by the way, could potentially be very isolating for people and very fragmented. But it could also, by the way, be very sort of inclusive. The final piece is self-employed, which again is something that Randstad know a great deal about. More people want to work for themselves. We see it absolutely with our MBA students. If you ask our MBA students, you know, how many of you want to work for a big company? 10% of them put their hands up. 10%. They want to start their own businesses. They're happy to sell the company to you. They're happy to work in a joint venture with you, but they ain't going to join you. And I think, you know, understanding the psyche of these large numbers of entrepreneurs is going to be very important. When we did this research last year, we got 200 executives together, and I told them all the stuff I've just told you, and then said, begin to describe lives in 2050 or 2025. And most of them were very negative. You know, working life in 2025, they said, it's very isolated, because your carbon footprint means you can't move around a lot. It's very fragmented, because family units are very small. And also, it's fragmented because technology. I mean, how many of you have already looked at your emails this morning? We have. I mean, I have as well. It's pathetic. And that's what we do. And we have very fragmented lives. You know, we're interrupted every 3 minutes already. Imagine how it will be in 20 years' time. It's a world of exclusion. We've always had a world of exclusion. But in the past, it was sub-Saharan Africa. Now it's the kid in your street who isn't smart enough or motivated enough to move, and it's a world potentially of technical addiction. But on the other hand, and this is my last slide, it's also, by the way, and I have kids, so I'm sort of very much interested in the future, I think that the positive aspects of what we've talked about are absolutely outweigh the negatives. But to get to the positive aspects, you have to do what I would say, create crafted lives and crafted organizations. You can't let everything spin on, imagining that it's going to work, because it isn't going to work. And these are the 4 ways that I think the world will become a better place, potentially in the future. First thing, transparency. We've already seen that in the labour market. People know who's good, who's rubbish, what jobs are interesting, who's paying what. That I wrote a book, as Brian said, called The Democratic Enterprise, and it was all about information, and you're going to get masses of information. Secondly, it's about choice. There will be people who always want to be investment bankers. There will be people who, you know, there will always be people who want to work 17 hours a day, but they'll know the consequences of that. There will be others who want to work differently, and being able to understand those patterns will be very crucial to you. It's a world of co-creation. Those of you who are following groups like Innocentive know that even now there are hundreds and thousands of people working together to solve problems using the internet. When you think that this has been the age of leisure, and most of our leisure time has been spent watching television, on average, we spend 27 hours a week watching television. Imagine if 5 hours a week, instead of watching television, was spent doing something interactive on the web with 5 billion other people. That's the sort of cognitive surplus that will completely change the world. The interesting thing about the Shell scenarios is change will happen not because of governments. They're the last ones to have to. We've already seen that with Copenhagen. It's not even particularly because with big business. It's about the 5 billion people connected to each other saying, we will live differently. Enormous opportunities for co-creation and enormous opportunities for balanced lives. If I said to you, you're going to live until 100, how would you live your life differently? And my guess is that you will want to create a much more balanced life where you learn right the way through it, where you take time off right the way through it, rather than the sprint that we do now. Thanks very much.
Thank you.